Welcome to Modern Aikidoist podcast. I'm really excited to have on for discussion today, Francisco de los Cobos. De los Cobos. I didn't want to pronounce that incorrectly. He's an Aikido instructor. He lived in Dallas and has moved to San Diego, California very recently. He's training out there. Also, as I understand, you're training and teaching, or you were teaching in Dallas up until then. The reason I wanted to bring you onto this show is to talk a little about your sport background and how it affected your Aikido and how you train. I've had a couple of interviews recently where we've talked about other arts and other methods of training influencing Aikido, and so I really thought about bringing you on. I was excited to get you going here. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on your background and some of the other things that you've allowed to impact your Aikido and your Aikido training.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you, Tristan, for having me here. It's always a pleasure having these discussions and these ideas bouncing. It's always very enriching. I enjoy your podcast in general very much. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of one of your podcasts. And I'm really happy to be here. And it's been a while since we talked. So I'm happy and excited about this. I started with the martial art of Taekwondo in Mexico, in the Mexico City. It's a very popular martial art, like almost, I would say, as popular as soccer at one point, at least in the 80s. Like there were Taekwondo schools all over the place. So a demonstration, started training when I was around 4 or 5 years old. And I had a very good luck to find a good instructor, right? Like kept the traditional side of the martial art, but at the same time pushed the sport side of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I always had that experience of having the benefits of the competitive sports side along with the martial aspect of things. And I think that was a great thing that influenced my view on the martial training in general, because like a lot of people, my main interest was always self-protection, self-defense. But like that, I think, well, in my opinion, in my experience, that goes very much hand in hand with the sports experience that you can get from some of the martial arts. So after that, like training about, I would say, like 16 years, I had a good chance of competing with high-level teams in Mexico. We went to Korea to do a training and competition there. Like, I mean, that's the mecca of Taekwondo. So, I saw like some really high-level teammates, competing in national and international events as well. So it was a enriching experience as well. After that, around the year 2000, that's when I got interested in Aikido. And I started just, training Aikido, nothing else, just Aikido. And I've been doing that for, the last, couple of years since that day. And around 10 years ago, I started getting a little interested again in those benefits of the pressure testing competition and feedback that you would get from a live opponent. So I started doing boxing and Muay Thai. Obviously, the kickboxing, the Muay Thai aspect was a little easier for me to pick up again because of my Taekwondo experience. A lot of kicking and some punching. But yeah, with the boxing and everything, like I got it again, like in a I would say like a quicker way that I could start competing again at an amateur level. And training with some of my partners were professional fighters and in a level, and it was good. And it was a good experience. And the thing was that on both sides, like because I never stopped training Aikido at the same time, right? So on both ends, there was always this question, like, oh, you're training. If I was in the Aikido school, oh, you're training MMA and doing all these competitions, but you still like Aikido and you still train here. And, other people as well, at the MMA gym, like, oh, you train here, you compete, you have won some tournaments or, some fights, but you still train Aikido, like kind of like why you still do that. Like, why are you interested in still both? And to me, it was just like a very natural blend of both approaches and both systems. And like, like I'm going not for the just being a champion in, some style or anything. It was more like the complete of getting the full well-rounded experience of being the most complete martial artist that I could be, right? So I had the weapons aspect. I also like to shoot. I also like to collect and learn how to utilize edged weapons like knives. And then Aikido has certain martial aspects that I really liked. And then the sports side of it had other benefits, and for me the two of them were like very well you just mixed together. Was like really it felt good to me. I didn't feel like there was a need for me to choose between one or the other. And I find that having that experience kind of inspired people from the traditional side, some friends that trained Aikido or karate or Taekwondo, to delve a little bit into the sports side of like competition, a little harder competition. And we'll talk about the benefits of that, especially the mental benefits of that competition. And I know the word on its own, the word competition, is like really looked down in the Aikido community, but it's not a competition against somebody else. Like the way I always have seen it, it's Masakatsu Agatsu. That's one of the main tenets of Aikido, right? Like the true victory is the victory over yourself. And that's the way I see it, Yeah, you go and there's a, superficial competition against another opponent, but the way I saw it and the way I felt it was like, it was just against myself, against my own shortcomings in training. Like, when you put yourself against another opponent that is training to their top level, and then you go in the ring or the cage, then you find out a lot about yourself. Like you really leave that cage with a win or the loss, but learning a lot about yourself. And that was an experience like so enriching, even before the actual match. I don't want to say competition again, like match. The training process changes completely when you have that focus, when you have that pressure, at least in the back of your mind, that you have, to reach a certain goal, a certain standard, and that changes your training completely, right? So, there's many benefits to it, like, but that's mainly what attracted me and kept me on both sides of the spectrum. The very traditional side that most Aikido schools handle, in the sports competition side of things.
I'm glad you brought up there's a number of great branches of topics to cover from what you just said. And I think the biggest one, or the first one for us to cover, is that Masakatsu Agatsu. And I think when people look at competitive fighters or competitive martial arts, the first thing they see when they look at them is you see one fighter trying to dominate another fighter, and you view that as being an external competition. And it is. However, in my experience, and I've got over 25, 27 years in competitive fighting, all of the top level competitors that I knew, they could win a tournament and they'd come away being upset. It wasn't about that they defeated their opponent. It was, how did they perform? Did they make mistakes? And maybe that their opponent never capitalized on those mistakes. Maybe he won anyway. They were never focused on, did I win the tournament or did I win the match? They were focused on, did I perform at my best when I was tested? When it mattered the most, when I needed to perform, did I perform the way that I trained? And oftentimes, almost every time, in fact, I can't remember one time having somebody come away and said, I'm really happy with my performance, even though, they won. They said, yes. No, I screwed up. I screwed up and I'm lucky. I'm lucky my opponent didn't catch it. But to address that issue is, when somebody gets into that realm, and I wanted to cover this, the three realms of fighting, and we're talking about the sport martial realm, and I view them as three separate realms. And then you have the academic martial arts, which some would call the traditional, or the koru, arts where you're focused on extreme technical precision above most everything else. And that includes even being focused on the aesthetic, making sure your technique looks really attractive, that it looks pretty, which I think a lot of Aikido really exists heavily in that realm. And they don't want to drift into the sport fighting realm or the third realm, which is self-defense and real combat. Like, this is where there's no rules. It happens suddenly, unlike sport where it's pre-planned, where you know where your opponent ahead of time. You get to study him. You get to train specifically for them. You know exactly when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen. And in the self-defense world, you don't know who's going to attack you. You don't know how many. You don't know when. You don't know where. You don't have that lead up. So each of those realms, I think, brings strength to their own strengths to the table. And what we were talking about with our little pre-interview yesterday of having somebody give 100% of their ability to overcome you in the sport realm. And I love this point that you made, which was, this is as close as you can get without it turning into a real heavy duty fight where your life may be in danger. And that intensity brings up an aspect of training that I believe gets lost in the academic training, which is when you're under that load of stress, where you have somebody who's willing to not only be as smart as they can possibly be to take you down, but also maybe just as rigorous, just using pure athleticism and physicality to overcome you, because that is a card to play. It's not necessarily how technical an attack is. It can be just there to overwhelm you. So I think that three realms gives us sort of the context of this discussion, and what a fighter, the benefits of training for that type of competition bring. And my favorite, and this is one of the reasons that I do the testing system that I do, to introduce my students to a little bit of that anxiety and pressure of what a sport fighter has. Like, in 3 weeks or in a month, you're going to have a test. We're all going to be watching. And I've yet to see a student that doesn't take that to heart and has that anxiety level of, my fellow students are watching me, my instructor's watching me. I don't want to screw up. I really need to perform well. I don't want to make any mistakes. Like, that's the kind of mindset that a fighter has going into that competition day, when this is their match. It's like, I can't afford mistakes. If I make a mistake, it could be over. That could be it. And so the testing that I like to do introduces a student to, okay, here's how your body and your mind behave when you're under stress, which is different than how it behaves during a normal class. Correct. You don't have that pressure in a class. You kind of feel, well, all right, if I make a mistake, maybe I get dinged a little bit, or but I'll do the next one better. You can't afford that in a self-defense.
Yeah, there's no situation. Mental pressure, and I like that you bring that up. In the end, one of the things that it's important, I think, that people should know beforehand what they want out of their training. Mm-hmm. And they can choose from all these three realms, and they overlap a little bit in between, there's not one pure one. They have a lot in common. They have a lot, crisscross in between them. Mm-hmm. As long as you know what you want and you're getting that out of your training, or you're giving, in case of instructors, you're giving that to your students, then it's good. It's perfect. Like, if you want to be a purist and you want to stay as close as you can, aesthetically and technically, like pure to your style, and that's what you're offering, then that's fine. But then don't call this self-defense. Don't tell your students that they can apply this in a real life scenario, or that they can go and do a sport competition with this, because they're going to be disappointed. You're doing a disservice to your students, to the art. But again, like, when you have somebody that it's a little more focused on the sports side of it, you have the pressure, you have the necessity to win, you have some kind of like, how can I call it? Like, it's just that, that mental pressure that you need to perform well, like you said. And you're doing good and you're used to that. And like you said, you come out of there, even if you win and you're like, damn, I didn't do good. Where are you going to find the answers? In the technical realm. So, you know, like they all mix and match a little bit, you know.
They all have their place.
Now, exactly. And if you're like on the pure self-defense side, then you just need to really put yourself to that mental stress. I like what you said yesterday, like get through that stress inoculation. And I believe the sport aspect of martial arts is the closest thing that we can get to get our mind and our bodies to prepare for that potential physical confrontation on the street, you know?
And I think that's where the realms of real violence and sport violence, their strength is that the people that participate in those realms get used to that level of violence. They just, normal people are scared to death of going into that realm, whereas they get used to it. That becomes, okay, well, it's another fight, you know, and you meet some of those people or see some of those people that come from the pure street fighting world, and they've never entered a dojo in their life. Their form may be poor, but they are good street fighters or good bar fighters. And
I think everybody, you know, has still that little nervousness, and you get a little afraid. Like that's natural, but the difference is that they know how to handle it or hide it or use it to their advantage.
In that pressure situation.
Like either way, like either they put it down, they shut it down, or they use it to their advantage. They amp themselves up. Like that somehow they know how to handle it. But that only comes with the experience in how, if you're only you know, traditionalist in that sense, you know, we talked about these three realms. How do you get that experience, that mind experience of getting used to that pressure? You need to put yourself through that. And I believe that's what the sports side of martial arts can offer, you know, like it's safe in the end. Yes. I mean, even just going technical, like you were talking about choreo, right? Like there's no sparring in choreo, but if you mess up one technique and you're practicing with weapons, with wooden weapons, you're going to get your head cracked, and that's still a risk. So no matter what, there's nothing that it's 100% safe. Like you can make your training as scientifically sound as you possibly can to make it like safe, but there's always a risk. So I think,
in fact, I'd say if there isn't a risk or isn't any danger, your training is substandard. You're not letting
you're
yourself,
just training form, you know, you're just training the form. That's, I mean, again, if that's what you intend to do, and you want to be a kata you know, champion, and you don't want the pressure of, you just want the pressure of people looking at you, or the pressure of not messing up, but you don't want the pressure of an external, you know, mind trying to impose on you, then it's fine, but just don't think that's going to help in a real fight. So that sports side of martial arts, I think it's something that I think everybody that is interested in self-defense should try. Again, it's not even about the technical or the physical, you know, side of it. It's the mental side. Like just thinking about this way, you know, like take any you know, sport oriented martial arts, be it wrestling, jiu-jitsu, or boxing, right? And you have a guy or a girl that competes constantly, that is used to that pressure of handling, like, oh, somebody wants to choke me, break my arm, punch me to, you know, till I mean, not dead, but you're unconscious. That pretty much counts as, you know, being dead in the street. But you're used to handling that pressure, and you get, you know, you learn ways to handle it. However it is, you know, again, you shut it down, you use it to your advantage, whatever it is. And then you have somebody that only trains physically, like techniques in a kata motion, as hard as the kata can be. Like your uke can attack you like really hard, but you know what's coming. You know what technique he's going to attack you with. You know what technique you're going to do. Even if it's a little bit of randori, you know it's going to stop after the technique. You know, there's not going to be a constant pressure against you technically, physically, mentally. So you take those two people, and then you expose them to an altercation, a physical, not even that, like let's go back a step. Like you expose them to a verbal attack, like a verbal violence on the street. I believe the one that has that confidence that, oh, if I have handled myself against multiple people, is going to have a better way to de-escalate and even avoid the fight than the people that has never been in that situation. Again, not that it cannot happen, but I guess the sport, competitor will have a better way of, remaining calm throughout that whole event. And if it gets physical, I think he's going to be more confident in his technique because he or she has put herself to the test many a time, as the other person has never done it. So it's just natural. Like if you don't have the experience, how are you going to, perform and solve, the problems of resistance or things not going your way? So I think that's one of the great values of the sport, side of martial arts.
Yeah, and being able to think when your brain is under stress, and it doesn't need to have fists flying at you for the stress to happen. When you are in a situation where you feel your safety is at risk, even before physical things start, the fear starts to come in, and the anxiety is like, can I get out of here? I can't get out of here. The doors are blocked, or you got to be able to think through that. And that's something that a sport competitor really needs to have. They can't just turn the brain off and let their body turn into a berserker. They have to solve their problem, and fighting really is 80% mental. The physical part is relatively minor.
Yeah.
Another myth that I really wanted to address with this too is, and I think this is for people that have not been exposed to the sport fighting realm very much, is that in sport fighting, the opponent is not an enemy. These people do not hate each other, even though that's what they often show, because that's what puts butts in the seats, and that's what makes
that's what
money.
Sells. That's what sells. Drama sells.
And when we talked about this yesterday, if you and I were competitive fighters in the same sport, and they scheduled a match for us, and everybody knew that you and I were roommates, we were best of friends, we grew up together, and we were going to have a fight, hardly anybody would want to be interested in watching it. But if they knew that I was dating your sister and I ran out on her, and you were angry at me and you wanted to tear my head off, and I was angry at you, well, now that's what they want to see. That's what a crowd
that's it. Yeah, that's a big,
they're like, I want to see that, because it's just going to be off the chain.
It's a big drama.
And so the part that disappoints me about sport fighting is, at least in terms of the marketing veil that they put out front, is that they try to sell that way. And professional wrestling,
they do sell that way.
Let's tune this to an art of engaging people to want to see the good guy versus the bad guy. Or
those are
people
black belts in selling that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but really behind the scenes, every fighter that I know, we look at each other like we're brothers. And that,
like buddies.
Even though you and I may compete at the very highest level against one another, we know that the other is going to bring out our best, and that we're going to be challenged at the highest level that we can be. And that's what we want, because when we face that high level of challenge, it makes us be better. It makes us have our art take it to the next level. You will bring out deficiencies in my training and my fighting that I may never have discovered, and you're the only person that can show them to me. And that there's a great value, and there's a great bond between sport fighters that do that with each other. And there's love there. It's not that there's not competition is not about disliking somebody.
Not at all. And I have never in the few years that I competed, like I have never had anybody after the fight, like win or lose, like hate you or talk about you or diss you or whatever. It's the opposite completely. You even end up training or helping them to prepare for their next fight, or you receive advice from them, or ask from advice, like, oh, like, remember when we fought, like, how did you feel this? What should I do against this new opponent? Whatever. Like it's a brotherhood. It really becomes. But again, you don't know that until you experience that side of the competitive, martial art training. Yep. So all the people that have never done that and just eat up all the media hype and all the Hollywood nonsense and all the, hate and rivalry and, oh, it's your enemy and all that kind of stuff. I think they are missing out on a lot that they could enrich their martial training and their lives in general if they tried a little bit of that. Or, you know, they can try it, they don't like it, it's not for them, but at least they know the truth. At least they experience that for themselves, instead of just believing in what, you know, media has out there. And they're like, oh, if you compete, you are a brute, you know, you hate other people. And us, like traditional martial artists, don't do that. I mean, come on, like I've seen traditional martial artists being like, you know, really disrespectful and having like lower standards than people that fight. It's not about, you know, the fighting or not. It's about just your values, you know, how you uphold them and you know, whatever you believe in, and just being a nice person, you know. And I think you agree with me, and you know that there's very few, if any, fighters that you know, at professional or amateur level, that are just like you know, meatheads, or like, you know, like that. There's none, because they have put themselves to the test, and they know there's always somebody better or stronger or with more luck that day. So they're not douche, you know,
right,
kind of thinking. They're not dickheads. They're really nice people, like most of them. But again, you don't know that until you're in the mix, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, and I found the same thing, that there was a yes, you had people that were performing at the top levels that had a bit of an ego. They knew they were good, but I agree with you. They did always know that there was somebody better, or on a given day, they may not be at their best and they're going to get beat. It was a way for them to, I think the effect was that their ego was kept in check, because they always knew they could run across somebody that had their number. Like you can't just walk around and be an arrogant jackass, because somebody's going to feed you your own ego. And it's gonna the bigger your mouth is, the worse it hurts when somebody shows up and says, listen, I got to take you to school. And but yet they also, when they ran across a gentleman competitor, or somebody who had, you know, tremendous honor and character, but yet that person beat them, they were joyful. I would drive across the country to get beat by some of these guys, because they were so good that they could show me how to be better, and they would teach me. They would share openly what they were doing, how they were doing it, help me to get to that point. And so that's a big part of it. And I think one of the things I missed the most from that competitive stuff was that focus you talked about earlier of, I know game time is coming. I know the switch has got to turn on. And having competed in large tournaments and high level, high intensity tournaments, your mind goes through an incredible odyssey of dealing with your self-doubt, your preparation, your ability to perform under that stress. But when it's game time, it's total focus. And I think that's what it shares in the sport realm. You have some time to prepare for it, to turn that switch on. And the day that you compete, when you get in front of your next opponent, that's when the switches have all got to be on. In a self-defense situation, you don't have a lead up, or you may not have much of a lead up, maybe a minute or two or a couple minutes. But when it's game time, you got to know how to turn that switch on. If you've never turned it on in your practice, or in have your training cycle include preparing you to turn that switch on, and what it's like to have it go on, you know, that's a big hole in your martial roundedness part. And I think,
correct,
you know, if we look at those three realms like a triangle, if you look at the center of the triangle, that's where all of the benefits of those three realms kind of come together. The technical precision of the sport fighter and the academic realm comes together with the mindset part of the sport realm and the real violence realm. They all meet in the middle when you have a good base of all of the elements brought together. And I think the farther you get away from that center, the more you get hyper specialized. And, you know, for example, a street fighter, he doesn't care about form. He doesn't care about technical ability. He just wants to be standing at the end. And, you know, there's a level of viciousness that street fight and craftiness, you know, the pure cunning of using things that are not legal, but you know, they work just because nobody knows about them. You pure surprise is something that exists in that real fighting realm that the sport realm has some of, but because sport competition limits rules, you are not very surprised about what you run into, because you've got a good briefing of, all right, here's
these are the rules.
Here's the rules, so I know kind of what I expect, but it does still happen. So I think that within the center of that triangle is where you get the mixture of all of those three realms together. But honing yourself to turn the switch on and say, now it's important, now it's go time, no mistakes, this has got to work. I think
that's the mental aspect that you're talking about. It's very hand in hand with the technical aspect, right?
Yep.
Like if you go to the basics, like you start to learn a technique, right? Throw a punch, do a throw, do a submission. Mm-hmm. You see it, and your brain understands what's going on. It's not that complicated, right? Like, it's very simple. Twist here, pull there. Like, it's not complicated. Mm-hmm. So in a mind level, you can learn it quick, but your body doesn't. The body needs repetition. The body needs to do it thousands of times to get proficient at it. And then your mind and your body, now they're in they're synchronized, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's the same with when you have an experience of when you have to deal with, like, your technique not working, or adapting in a different way, or handling violence so your brain doesn't shut out, or you don't just become a crazy beast, because you're going to be very unscientific and untechnical. You can only get that through experience. Again, maybe you see it, maybe you read about it, maybe you study it, but if you have never gone through it, your body, your mind, your cells, your body is not going to know how to handle it. When it happens, everything, or most everything, needs to have that previous training and experience, and just get used to it. So again, how do you get that experience? Like we talked about yesterday, you don't go out and just start picking up fights and see how much experience you get before you get put in jail, or run into the wrong guy, and puts you in the hospital, or worse. So what is the closest thing that we have that is safe? Sports competition. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to see it like that. If you see it in the way that we started talking, like it's the competition against yourself, then the guy in front of you is not your opponent anymore. It's your partner. It's your brother in arms that will help you get better. If you see it in that way, then that guy across from you in the ring or the cage, it's almost as part of your same army. It's another soldier that is helping you get better for when you have to use it against a real enemy, a real somebody that is trying to harm you or your family.
And you could also view that as being like, if you were the sword, this was the stone that you sharpened the sword on. Like, and it's a really good stone that is there to take away the flaws and help you find them so that you can remove them through your training.
So you can be ready in case you actually need it.
Right.
So I think it's very interesting, just as a study subject, that people that haven't experienced it try to compete, like at least once or twice in their life, and have that mental pressure, because that adrenaline dump and that mental stress, it's gonna be the closest they're ever gonna feel to comparing to like a self-defense situation on the street, or
right.
whatever. So that would be a really, really enriching thing for the people that say that competition is not something that should be done. Well, don't see it just don't look at it as competing against another guy. It's competing against yourself. Mm-hmm. And that is part of any martial arts traditional or not value system or training aspect. Like, just it's against yourself. It's bettering yourself. And again, that's the way I saw it always. This is not training to beat another guy. It's just to better myself. It's that masakatsu agatsu. So that's the part I like about it. And that's why I was always very comfortable, like having the two sides of the those martial training systems, like, together, hand to hand.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the most insightful things I read about mindset of fighting actually was a quote from Wyatt Earp, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he said, "The art of gunfighting is learning to move slow in a hurry." And that he talked about that. You think about speed, but you also think, to me, I've seen people that say, okay, now it's game time. I'm just going to fight as fast and as hard as I can, and that's what's going to win. But that isn't, because when you start to go as fast as you can go, or what you believe, you rush and you hurry, you scramble, you make mistakes, you don't move very well, you wind up being jittery. You know, you need to calm your mind down. And what I found is that when you get into intermediate competitors and on up, they're not fighting with a berserk mind or a frantic mind. They're fighting with a calm, cool smoothness, and that's what makes a great fighter. And yes, they can be very vigorous. You know, you think of somebody like a Mike Tyson or something, but he executed, if you really watch his movements, he executes everything he does. It's fast and it's sudden, but he just goes through it smooth. I mean, everything is smooth. And then you watch like a Muhammad Ali, who's got that fluid, that fluidity. He's not rushing. He's taking his time, but he knows exactly where to go. He makes, very few mistakes. And that's how I look at it, is how do you use competition to learn how to make the fewest mistakes. You want basically the perfect game. And one of the things I remember learning as an intermediate fighter was the concept of, imagine it like a tennis game. You can take on a tennis opponent by trying to scramble around and pound the ball into every corner of the court to try to overwhelm them. That's kind of like being hyper aggressive. Or you can make sure the ball just keeps going back across the net and let them make the mistake. So as long as you've got a tight, good defensive game, and you can keep your balance, keep your poise, keep your mind calm, stay fluid, and be able to move, let the other guy panic. Let him come unglued and make him want to scramble. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, the mindset of that sport realm of, all right, how am I going to deal with this guy? And then the other big one, which is reading an opponent and say, what's the best tactic I'm going to use against this particular opponent right here? And that being able to read a situation is important in self-defense. And that's a reading and having your mind relaxed so you can see the world for what it is, or see your opponent for what he really is a skill that I think in the academic world is very much missing. Being able to, all right, what am I dealing with here? Am I dealing with somebody who likes to kick, or am I dealing with a wrestler? And you can tell how they hold their body, how they tend to move will give you indicators as to what you might be running into.
Yeah, and again, like that experience you only get through, that going through it, like putting yourself through, like, okay, somebody's, gonna fight me, like, I know who that person is, maybe I can study them, but what if they switch the technique at the last moment? What if they change their strategy? So you need to learn how to adapt, and that adaptability that you gain from that, it's very valuable, in a real altercation. So it's not only the handling yourself, your mental pressure and fears, but also like then comes the physically adapting your technique to handle, how you're being attacked. And you cannot gain that, in any other way, I believe. Sure. Like, again, as long as you're training within a, safe, like within a safe method, but if your uka is not really like dead set on putting you down in simulating, like trying to hurt you, within, limits of what it is, the techniques, then I don't think you can develop that mindset, and then you're missing out on a lot. So it is important. And that's what we talked about too, yesterday a little bit. You see, the people that have gone through that experience, be it a street fighter or be it a high level competitor, you see them in very stressful situations, and they're the calmest ever. And when you see a guy in a stressful situation being calm, you're like, oh, this dude's dangerous. This dude you don't want to mess with this guy. And when they're like, yelling and puffing their chest up and, you know, being extremely aggressive, that doesn't mean they're not a threat, but at least you know what's coming, and then you can assess and you can, you know, choose your better, you know, way of the better course of action. But the one that is calm, the one that is like, you know, not doing much, you're like, okay, don't mess with this guy. Like, you don't know what's coming. So, and again, you gain that through that experience, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. You know, I think bouncers often say the guy you got to worry about the most is the quietest guy in the room. Usually the ones who bark aren't as much of a problem as the ones who don't.
Yes.
And, you know, the thing that I noticed as well about those dealing with the opponent aspect is having somebody giving 100%, trying to overcome you. And I think initially when I started way back, I think I was in my teens, I had even a distaste for competition. Like it didn't feel in my gut, you know, that I wanted to compete, because there's a personal element to that. But it was something that I learned, like it's not a personal thing. And this is something that the real violence world, and I would count bouncers and security people as being great examples for, it's not personal with them. If they have to handle somebody that's being a violent problem, it's like they don't hate the person. They just got to handle the situation. They got to get them out of the bar if it's in a bar situation, or they got to make sure people are protected. If it's a fight, they got to break it up. Like, it's just business. And that's something that I think helps the mindset of, whether it's I'm in a sport ring and I'm facing an opponent, it's business. I'm here to do my art, and I'm here to do this as well as I can. Or if you're in, you know, a violent profession, it's like, I got to handle this guy. He's tearing my club apart. I gotta deal with him and get him out of here. But it's not personal. And I think the same thing holds true in a self-defense situation. You don't want to let your inner part off a chain and go, I got to rip this guy's head off because he dared to attack me. It's like, nope, you've got a security threat here. You need to handle it. You got to keep a calm mind. And this is just me. I'm sure other people have other methods. To me, having a calm mind all the time is the easiest way that I can keep my strategic thinking clear, by trying to remain calm. And I've got to be focused on the goal. I can't let my focus sway, but I can't be overwhelmed by you know, he might have a knife, right? This might happen, that might happen. And you let that, the fog of war sort of start to blind you. And so, you know, being able to keep that calm is an important aspect.
I think that's a very good point that you just touched. Like you keep it business, you know, like in any of the three realms, if you let, especially in the sport and the self-defense, is a little easier that it can happen. In the technical side, there's not much of it anyway, but, you know, that's what they're, you know, missing out. So you keep it business. I mean, obviously in the sport realm, if you try to go crazy on the other guy because you think it's personal, there's a referee to stop you, and there's his whole other team and your own team that is going to stop you. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
But if you try to do that in a self-defense situation, like if you let it get personal or you make it personal, that's when you can lose for real, because you got to know what winning means. In the sport competition, it's beating a guy, you know, by points or submission or knockout. On the street, winning is getting home safe. That's it. Surviving. That's it. It's not beating the other guy. It completely changes. Like, it's not about beating the other guy. It's not especially about teaching him a lesson. It's not about that, because when you start thinking about that, you're gonna end up losing more. Yeah, you might be the guy, you might kill him, you might maim him, you might injure him, and then he's gonna sue you, or he's gonna be dead and you're gonna be held responsible and charges are gonna be pressed, and you're gonna end up wasting a lot of time and money, and you might end up in jail. Like, it's not about teaching the other guy a lesson. It's knowing what you need to do, what winning means on the street. In this case, my belief is surviving, protecting your family, and just getting the hell out of Dodge if problem is there and you have the chance. You know, you're not there to finish the fight. You're there to get away from the fight, you know? So if you let it get personal, it can get you in a lot of trouble. I think that that ability to keep things in a business, let's so to speak, perspective, and keep a cool mind that you gain through competitive training can help you a great deal outside, because then you can stay cool, and then you can, think through things, and then if you actually, defend yourself in an effective way, and you have the guy at your mercy, that's your chance to run, not to finish him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Depending on the situation. But if you don't have that experience, you might just, maybe your technique works and you end up in bigger trouble, for actually, doing what you shouldn't. So yeah, it's a very important thing to do.
One of the things, when I got started into fighting, I did it because I was really interested in it, and it was fun. I enjoyed it.
It is fun.
As I got more experienced into the self-defense realm, the mindset is drastically different. The goal there is you want to end a fight. Optimally, you don't even get to the point where the fight starts. You've intercepted it through playing smart or putting somebody in checkmate before the fight even begins. That's what a lot of bouncers and security people will say, that you can, they maneuver it to do it that way. And that's a realm that I will probably have another interview in the future on, because I like these specialized interviews where we talk about the strength of these realms and what they have to offer. It allowed me to keep focused on, because I have worked on security. I've done large parties, over 1,000 people. We've had security problems and stuff. And your mindset always has to be, we have to end violence as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, with, no injury. We don't want any injury. We don't want anybody getting either hurt or arrested. We want, the problem to go away as quickly as possible, as peacefully as possible. And to me, that seems very Aikido, in terms of what is your intent? You're not there to pick a fight or get in a fight or prove you're a great fighter. You're there to end violence as quickly as you can. Yeah,
even before it starts. That's
efficiently as possible, win, with the least amount of damage to anybody.
That's the ultimate win, to win without unsheathing your sword, right? Like the peaceful warrior way. And I like it. And like I did a little bit of security, in Texas, and I did, a little bit here when I moved to California. And what you learn there and what you use, and for me it was just like a study of that, like human interaction, especially with like unwilling, out of their mind or drunk or high, like, people. And what you find out is that most of the time you can just talk your way down. You can just talk your way out of it. You can just even bullshit your way out of it,
Yeah. Often
and
the
then
best
you
way to go.
avoid the violence. Exactly. And like 99% of times you can do that, which means that in the real world, like an attack, you can diffuse it, or, bullshit your way out of it, talk your way out of it, or just be aware and not get into it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
In that 1% where you're going to get physical, you just have to have the confidence in your technique, in your strategy, that or if it fails, that you know how to adapt and change at the moment, right? Without thinking, technically and mentally. So I think that is a great benefit that you get from this kind of training as well.
Right. And also I think with the spectrum of, and I love the analogy you said about end the fight without drawing your sword. It doesn't mean that the sword blade is all rusty and pitted and it doesn't have an edge, and it's useless if you draw it out. The benefit of having that sword is if you do draw it out, it's sharp, it's ready to go, and you know how to use it. And I think that even within that analogy, you could expand it further and say, all right, I don't want this to go physical. You could have this in the back of your mind. For example, you get into some heated type situation, you're thinking, I don't want this to go physical, but I know if it does, I'm ready. If I have to have it go physical, I'm not going to, leave this person with a broken neck or dead. I'm going to do what I need to control the situation, to make sure I don't get harmed. Hopefully they don't get harmed. If I can do it, maybe I can't. And I need, that will be determined by two things. One is the level of intensity of the aggressor, and then my own ability. Because we have to be realistic and say, I'll admit, I'm not a god of martial arts or Aikido. I could get overwhelmed. I might have to use something that would go beyond what I would like to do, which is to alter and control somebody without harming them, that would keep me safe and my loved ones safe. That's my ivory tower perfection. But I might not get that. You know, there might be multiple people. The person might be armed. They might be much bigger than me. They might be heavily skilled. You just don't know. That's just the wild card of real violence.
And you know, like I like that subject you just touched, like the variables, right? Mm-hmm. The variables in a street fight, and this is one of the things that I find like really funny about like people that are trying to discredit the competition side of martial arts, that they say like, oh well, in the street it's not just gonna be one opponent, or you don't know when it's gonna be the fight, or there might be multiple. Well, exactly. So if you cannot even handle one guy being the hardest physically and mentally in you, much less you're gonna be able to control like multiple guys or diffuse the situation, because you're not gonna know how to be calm, how to remain calm, how to either talk your way out of it or go and flip the switch when you need to. Yeah. So just because sports doesn't have that aspect, that doesn't take away from it. You know, again, it still is the closest thing that you can get.
Yeah,
the closest experience in a safe way that you can get to actual fight stress.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things I've heard repeatedly that I definitely wanted to address is the idea that, and this is pretty well accepted by at least most people that aren't delusional, is if you do get into a real fight or into a self-defense situation where, you're dealing with a high level of violence, you could do everything right and still lose. Mm-hmm. And of course, the next thing is, well, what's the point of training then? And my answer to that is, you still have to try, because if you don't try, that could be just it for you. And the training that we do is there to increase our odds of survival. It's not to make us invincible or indomitable, but I personally want my odds to be as good as they can be. And by continuing to train, they bump up just a little bit. And it's true. I might not win. I might be overwhelmed, but my mental side is I'm going to make it damn tough for somebody to dominate.
But you have a better chance of survival.
Right.
So
my chance of survival is better, I'm not going to be an easy target. I'm going to make somebody work for it, and I'm going to take a chunk out of their hide as I do it.
Exactly.
They might beat me. Yep.
Just the give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Just the physical the physical training, right? That you get out of that. Like, okay, so we go back to the goal of the self-defense. It's survival, right? Mm-hmm. Survival, but having a good life, not like just, surviving like in a bad way, like living in a bad way. You want the best odds of a good life for you. Mm-hmm. So just the physical training that you go through in the martial arts, it's going to give you a better level of life. You're going to be healthier. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be more flexible. You're going to be able to enjoy your life a little better, I believe, right? You're going to have less vices. So just that overall means good for you and the people that are around you, right? And just by that, you might get to a physical level that people see you and they don't want trouble with you, because you look good, you're strong, you're confident. So you avoid a lot of, trouble just by being like, a good, your best self, let's just call it. Sure. Just the physical side, again, like if you need to run from trouble and you're like, a good athlete, you can just run away and that's it. If you're alone, that gets you out of trouble. So why train? It gives you a very, very good physical advantage of surviving in many ways. And the second, it's so much fun. Why not? Like, it's just so much fun. It's a good habit, it's almost like a good vice, I would call it, because it's just, it just draws you in, and you want to train more and you want to do more and you want to learn more. And it's something that is building you, like mentally, physically. You meet people that are in the same realm, that are interested in the same things. Just like this conversation that you and I are having, like we met because we were interested in the same thing. So if I was never training Aikido or not, interested in this, I would not have met you, and I would have missed a lot of the things that you have taught me, that you have brought me, not only directly when we, met, when we trained that one day, or when we talk, but all the people that you have interviewed, and I'm interested in that. Like, I gained so much just from that interaction with you in many indirect ways. So there's just so many benefits to the training. So yeah, to the people that say like, oh, then why training? Wow, like there's just so many things that you're missing. Just, if you leave that training alone. And yeah, in the end, like the survival rate is 0. So might as well make it the best while you're here. Right. But I would not be happy if the odds would beat me in the end because I didn't do what I could.
Right.
Because I was just like, nah, I'm going to probably not, survive anyway. So like, why train? Why waste my time there? So instead of that, what are you doing? Like, what is better than that? Like, what other things are you doing? So anyway.
Well, and that point brings up one I wanted to cover before we wrap things up, and that is something I've noticed quite a bit with Aikido and a lot of the academic focused arts, which is, you go through your paired katas, you have your attacker, but you have your attacker really tone down the intensity level to the point where it just gets like, it feels like a walkthrough. Mm-hmm. When you get used to facing soft attacks or gentle attacks, if you get a rigorous attack, you will be overwhelmed. You're not ready for
mentally.
it. You're not
maybe
mentally
physically
built.
You're ready.
Yeah.
Maybe physically you're ready, but mentally you're gonna be like that little shock.
And here's a big one, and that is the body can't do what the mind can't comprehend. True. You could have a physically fit, athletic body. If your mind isn't prepared for it, the body won't do it all by itself. And so
correct.
The more you take, even using, I guess, the word competition, you could kind of use that, but make it more of a challenge. If you're handling your uke pretty well, or your uke's attack, say, put some heat on it. I want you to give me some intensity. Be a little unpredictable. Try to mess with my timing, or change the attack. Give me something as I'm, going through. If you see a leg, try to grab the leg and do a takedown.
Correct.
These things are ways. You don't have to go turn your dojo into a Conan pit, dual pit, where you're beating each other senseless all the time. But push your level a little bit. Challenge yourself more. Say, I want to be dealing with a more dangerous uke. And
yes,
maybe you say, instead of going 10 miles an hour, go 20 miles an hour. And then you get used to 20 miles an hour, say go 30. And then you get used to that. Say, I want you to go 45. Like ramp it up so that I'm getting used to speed, variables, cunning, deception. And, we talk about, what's the old phrase? All warfare is deception. All combat is deception. Well,
yes.
if all you do is paired kata, you remove the deception.
You don't know anything. Yeah.
Right. You're not ready for that. And I'll tell you, as a competitor, deception was my favorite tool. Using feints, fakes, setting people up, baiting them, all of that stuff does happen. And I've talked to people that are street fighters and have had experience with, ambushing people and getting into fights, and they've got their tricks. They are built on deception.
It's all about
they don't really want to
like,
stand up fist fight. They want to trick somebody and knock them out. Like,
yes,
that's basically how it goes.
My instructor, George Przewalski, which I really appreciate. He's one of my closest friends too, and I learned, and I still am learning a lot from him. Like he has a really good mindset for the fight game,
mm-hmm.
As a sport, but it's also very applicable just in general to street fight or life. And one of the pieces is like, you cannot just, he uses this analogy and it's hilarious and I love it. Like, you cannot just go out and try to knock somebody out, just throw your hardest punch. Because it's not, it might work.
Mm-hmm.
When it's going to work, when you're like super, like superior to the other guy physically and athletically. So he always used to say, like, you cannot go to a bar and just yell like, who wants to come with me to bed, pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
He used different words, but I'm just gonna keep it, anyway,
family friendly. Yeah.
Unless you are like rich, you're showing it and you're super good looking, it might work. But if not, you need a game, right? Mm-hmm. If not, you need setups. If not, you need how to approach people, how to be inviting, how to be charming and all that. Well, it's the same in the fighting realm. Like, You cannot just go out and try to overwhelm. It might work once or twice if you're physically superior, but if not, you need tricks, you need setups, you need a strategy, you need like all that stuff that it's what you gain through that training. And I really like what you said, like, okay, there's a lot of traditional people, not only in Aikido, but in other arts, that definitely don't want to, go and do a competition. That's fine. But if you want your art to get to that level where you can use it in a fight, then definitely have your training partner, level it up a little bit.
It's like a simulator.
You can do it in a safe way. Yes, and you can do it in a safe way. But see, this is the thing. Like, let's get the Aikido example. Like, if you want to have, and this is how it started for me. This is how it started going and drifting into boxing and going back again to the competition. I was feeling like, okay, yeah, I can deal with Shomen and Byokumen and Suki, but what about, how they set it up or how they move, or how they approach? So that's why I started, training the boxing side of things, right? Like, so I went to the gym and I just asked the guys to just try to punch me. Like, they're training their setups, they're training their strategy, their techniques, and I was just training my defense and my, my control. And that's great because and again, I was not hating them. They were not hating me. They were just helping me. And at the beginning, like, like this Aikido guy comes into a boxing gym and asks people to punch them. They all look at me weird, but little by little, they were like, okay, yes. And I started with the more beginner people, and the instructors helped me a lot. And they were like, okay, like, you can handle this guy. Let's put somebody that has a little more experience or a little more aggressiveness, or somebody that has actually, being a Golden Gloves champion. And it started going up little by little. And that's how you can take your training. You start, adding more things little by little. When you can handle things, then you get some other element. When you are used to that element, a little bit more. But what I'm talking about here is that then your uke needs to get better as an attacker as well. So that means your uke. So how are you going to handle, how are you going to develop good technique at defending against good punching if your uke doesn't know how to throw a correct punch? So your uke, or yourself, when you're an uke, you need to know how to punch, right? Which means you're going to have to cross-train most likely, unless your instructor is very well versed in striking or submissions or whatever you want to defend against. So we go again to the cross-training side of things. Like, if you want to develop a good strategy against defending whatever, you need to train that. You need to cross-train. And, I hope sometime, in the future, most martial arts instructors that are teaching some type of fighting art, that sell it as a self-defense or as a, just a martial, art on its own, that know a little bit of all these things, and if they don't, at least they can bring somebody from another gym and say, like, okay, like, once or twice a week, we're going to take boxing, we're going to take jiu-jitsu, we're going to take wrestling, we're going to take Muay Thai, and we keep it within our art, but we know how to handle these, most common ways, the most effective ways that people are going to use to attack us. And I think that would be great. I think that would be a real valuable lesson for everybody involved, Like, the people that are just focused on the sports side will know all the advantages of the traditional side of the technical study, and they would gain something from it. And the people that are just, being technical, they will get all that mind training and that stress inoculation and preparation of having a really good guy trying to attack you and doing their damn best to put you down.
I would echo what I believe was Sensei's concern about having Aikido turn into a sport. I personally, as much as I admire martial sport, I recognize its downfalls. It will eventually grow into its own thing. And I would say judo's probably done the best job of remaining pretty intact as a practical art that can be easily shifted to a self-defense application without getting really hyper-specialized. But sports tend to become hyper-specialized over time. And,
yes.
But I think, and you describe a great way of taking the good part of the sport realm into Aikido training without having to turn it into a sport. I don't think it should be a sport. you know, but we can get some great stuff from how competitive fighters train, because and how they bring in that mental stress, how they bring in the stress inoculation,
Correct.
you know, getting used to it, getting used to different attacks. Because from a self-defense realm, you don't know, you could be attacked by anything, you know, whether it's, you know, thigh kicks like from Muay Thai, or tackles and takedowns like from wrestling. I mean, that's the challenge of the real world realm, is anything goes. You got to be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
And so
And
I think, you know, these are ways that I've brought this into my own training for over a decade now, and I really liked it, and I really liked how my students have responded to it.
and
My
I agree
favorite
with
thing
that,
as
you
a
know,
teacher is to share in that, in getting my students aware of what they're capable of doing, because they're shocked. Well, like,
yes.
I could stop a leg takedown? Really? Like, they leave a class going, wow, I learned how to do a sprawl, and I'm not going to have somebody take me down, or it's going to be really hard for them. And that's to me, the joy of teaching. It's also the joy of learning, because when you learn something new, you think, God, I've got like this superpower. I've got this thing I can do, you know, it's really great. And I think that came to me most through being a competitive fighter, not only learning those things, whether I figured them out on my own or I had somebody else show them to me, and then I could go apply them and get success with them. And that's the part, I think, getting that success, you almost need some kind of venue that challenges you at finds out where your limit is, challenges you, and then you overcome and you get that success. Like, that is a tremendous feel, that no matter how good or how pretty and precise you do your kata, there's nothing like it.
It's an
It feels
accomplishment in
great.
a different way.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of accomplishment that you earn, and you feel so good about it, and it makes you grow too. And I agree, like that's the thing that I don't think I have addressed correctly in other interviews, in other ways of talking to people. Like, as much as I love the sports side of it, again, because it's fun, because it's just like good, the training and the benefits that you get from it. I'm not saying that traditional arts, in this case Aikido, should become a sport, because it cannot. Just the fact that it's a budo, right? It's a system where you have one attacker and one defender, very specific, right? There's an uke. You need an uke. You need to be an age, and you need your uke. But that doesn't mean that the uke cannot step it up a couple of notches, like every now and then, and learn better techniques to attack you, and learn different ways to trick you, so you learn to deal with those things on a regular basis, and feel that stress side of, like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know how my uke is gonna deal with me this time. Like what new trick he's gonna pull from his sleeve. So you mentally are gonna be ready to deal with all that if you put yourself through that. So yes, Aikido in this case, or any other martial arts, do not have to become sports to get those benefits, but they can learn from the sports side, from the combat sports. They can bring a lot of these benefits into the training, which is what I think you and I have, tried to do. And it works, man. And it just, like you said, feels great. And your students learn something practical. And then just in my case, like, I feel like it's a little less, or a little more of a truth when you call what you're teaching martial, martial art, martial sport, martial whatever, then you're actually teaching your students how to fight in the end. Yes, or how the added benefits,
participate in violence, still with that focus of, I'm going to put an end to this, or I'm going to save myself from it. That's to me the Nage mindset. It's, I'm not going to go get into a fight. I'm going to put a stop to it. It still has that focus, but having that higher level of intensity, just so that they're used to it. Absolutely, I totally.
Which I like what you just said. Stop the fight either before it happens, when it's happening, or when I'm done with it. Like, don't keep going. Like, stop the violence. Right. Which isn't that the meaning of the kanji for martial, the Chinese or Japanese kanji for martial? It's stop the spear. I believe it's like
Okay.
that. So
Yeah,
that's
you're
the,
getting deeper
the
into Chinese than I'm
that's
familiar
the
with.
meaning. That's the meaning of that bu, or fu, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the language. I think that's the meaning of that kanji. Stop despair, stop violence, stop
Yeah.
war.
Well, I
So
tell you, I like it. I'm sure that we're going to get some comments about people saying, "Well, here's what Budo really means," and it's probably going to be a whole thread. But I like it. That sentiment, that stop the spear, I dig it. Like that to me is what martial arts is about. It's not learning to be a beast or learning to be violent. It's I have the ability to stop it efficiently, or at least have a good chance of doing it. That's why I keep training. So.
I like that. Like being realistic too. I'm not training to become a god of war.
Mm-hmm.
I'm training to increase my odds of survival. Be very sober about your goals, and I think you're gonna, reach those goals and feel good about them. And have that confidence. Like, okay, if I get into a scuffle or if a violent situation is happening, I can either diffuse it or I can handle myself. And I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna go home today to my family.
Right. Yeah, and we could probably even have another whole discussion on the topic of not only are we there to protect ourselves, but as mature adults, we have an obligation to our community and to our society to not just protect our own bodies, but our family, our neighbors, other peaceful human beings that perhaps don't have the abilities that we do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's an obligation. I know this goes back into the warrior mythos, that the warrior of a society was a protector. It was like a guardian, and I view myself that way. That my art is not just to protect my own life; it's to keep peace where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read somewhere long ago the idea, an old medieval warrior says, where my sword is drawn, peace will follow. And that's, I view as very much that warrior mindset of, I'm not here just to be a killing machine. I'm here to keep peace.
Yeah. To have your art, like in a physical way, follow a philosophical way of, like, establishing something good around yourself.
Right. Exactly.
I like it.
So was there anything we talked about previously that we missed today? I know we covered, I think, just about everything. Can you think of anything that I'm maybe have overlooked?
I don't think so. I think, the one of the main things was the mental aspect of that, benefits that combat sports can bring into traditional training, that it doesn't need to become a sport, that it just needs to learn some of the lessons that are taken from that, art, and enhance your own art. Mm-hmm. And what else? I think that's it, Tristan. I mean, okay. we can definitely cover more
I guess I'll leave
topics,
on one last thought, and that is, I very much view the training in like layers. You have at the base layer, if you imagine a pyramid, the base layer is the physical, and that's where we do, hone the body. We build our bodies up, whether it's just with athletics or with technique. And then there's the mental realm above that, which you can have a strong physical, but if your mental is off, you won't be able to perform. So you build up the mental, and then at the very top is the spiritual. And so I think going through training, you start with the physical, then you go into the mental, and then you go to the spiritual. And when you have gotten a strong base of the physical and the mental, then your spirit becomes calm. You become less reactionary, less, I don't want to say emotional, because everybody's going to be emotional, but less hyper reactive, or less.
But you can control that emotion.
You can control.
You learn how to control yourself.
Yes. And that's a big part of that mental thing, which I think goes through the thread of everything we've talked about today. There's so much in that mental realm that just doing the physical it's going to help you get there, but that's its own world all in of itself.
Yeah. And that's interesting how you say, like, I've experienced sometimes, like, when we were going for a, little harder training to, another gym, or like a little sparring session, and you start getting that stress, you start getting that pressure, and you start learning how to deal with it. And sometimes we didn't, or not everybody got an opponent, for the sparring, and we went home without fighting, but you still went through that mental preparation. So you
yeah.
still did the mental training, even though you didn't do the physical side. You still had the mental aspect just because you put yourself in that situation. Like, okay, I'm gonna go and do a sparring session, at another gym. And even if you didn't get an opponent that day, but you went through all that stress inoculation. So the next time, if you get an opponent or not, well, especially if you do get one, you know how to handle yourself a little better just because you went through that process, So it's very interesting, and it's, it's something like good too, like I always like that. It's one of those things that says like every day learn something, every day do this and that. And one of the points says every day do something that scares you. And I like that. That's pretty much stress inoculation, like learn, I mean, not in a way that is going to put your life at risk, but put yourself through some, heat. So again, like, the way you used the similarities between the sword and the grinding stone. Same thing when you're forging the sword, you put yourself through the heat to make it, to temper it, to temper your body, to temper your mind, to temper your spirit, in the highest level of this. So yeah, I like the idea.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Francisco. I think this has been a great conversation. I think we could chat all day and into tomorrow. So
yes, definitely.
This has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for inviting me, and I appreciate you. And I definitely we need to get together again on the mats.
Absolutely.
Maybe with masks and all that, whatever we require.
We'll figure something out. That's for sure.
We're healthy now. Like we're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we need to do that. And again, I appreciate you a lot. Like I appreciate what you're doing. Like this podcast that you're doing, inviting all the people, bouncing all those ideas. I think it's very enriching, and I think the people that are taking the time to listen to this, I hope they learn a lot and they enrich their own martial journey through it. So yeah, again, thanks. It's a pleasure. Because
remember, as living beings, we're all only ever growing or dying. And if you're not growing, then you're dying.
I agree.
So
I agree.
I think our art is the same way.
Yeah, we either evolve or we become stagnant in any living thing, in any science, that anything that is going to be current and that matters should go through the same process, I think.
Absolutely.
So yeah, perfect. Tristan, thank you again for everything.
You bet. Thank you very much, Francisco.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for watching and supporting this podcast. Enjoy your training.